The wind howls across the Antarctic plateau with a sound like the breathing of some vast, sleeping creature. For thousands of miles in every direction, nothing moves except the endless procession of snow crystals dancing in the perpetual twilight. This is Earth's most alien landscape, a continent larger than Europe and Australia combined, yet so hostile to life that it remains almost entirely uninhabited by humans. The ice here is over 2 miles thick in places, containing 70% of the world's fresh water locked in a crystalline prison that has endured for millions of years. Yet beneath this frozen wasteland lies one of history's most perplexing mysteries. In the archives of the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, Turkey, a map drawn in 1513 AD by the Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis shows something that should have been impossible for any medieval cartographer to know. The coastline of Antarctica, depicted with startling accuracy, but without any ice covering whatsoever. The map itself is a masterpiece of Renaissance cartography, drawn on gazelle skin with meticulous attention to detail. Piri Reis, a renowned naval commander and skilled mapmaker, claimed to have compiled his chart from over 20 ancient source maps, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. But what makes this particular map extraordinary is not its age or craftsmanship. It's what it reveals about a continent that wouldn't be officially discovered by European explorers for another 300 years. The northern coast of the Antarctic Peninsula appears on Piri Reis's map with geographical features that match modern satellite surveys with uncanny precision. Mountain ranges, bays, and coastal indentations are positioned exactly where 21st century instruments have confirmed them to be. Most remarkably, the coastline is shown as it would appear, without the massive ice sheet that has covered it for millions of years, revealing the actual rocky shoreline that lies hidden beneath miles of accumulated ice. This should have been impossible. In 1513 AD, Antarctica was not only undiscovered by European civilization, but the continent was already buried beneath an ice sheet that had been accumulating for at least 15 million years. No human civilization in recorded history had ever seen the ice-free coastline that Piri Reis somehow managed to map with extraordinary accuracy. The implications are staggering. Either Piri Reis possessed source maps created by some unknown civilization that had explored Antarctica when it was still ice-free millions of years ago, or he had access to surveying techniques that wouldn't be available to human cartographers until the advent of satellite technology in the 20th century. Both possibilities challenge everything we think we know about the history of human civilization and our planet's climate. The mystery deepened when researchers began examining other historical maps from the medieval and Renaissance periods. The Orontius Phineus map of 1531 AD shows the entire Antarctic continent with remarkable detail, including inland mountain ranges and river systems that weren't confirmed by modern exploration until the International Geophysical Year of 1957. The Mercator map of 1569 AD depicts Antarctica as an ice-free landmass with clear geographical features, while the Buachi map of 1754 AD shows the continent as it would appear if all ice were removed, revealing a landscape that wouldn't be confirmed until ground-penetrating radar surveys of the late 20th century. These cartographic anomalies caught the attention of Charles Hapgood, a professor of history at Keene State College in New Hampshire, who spent decades analysing ancient maps and their impossible geographical knowledge. Working in the 1950s and 1960s, Hapgood compared historical charts with the most advanced geographical surveys available to modern science. His conclusions were unsettling. Multiple ancient civilizations appear to have possessed accurate knowledge of global geography that far exceeded what conventional history suggested was possible. Hapgood's research revealed that ancient cartographers had somehow obtained precise measurements of longitude, a navigational technique that wouldn't be mastered by European sailors until the invention of accurate chronometers in the 18th century. The maps showed correct relative distances between continents, accurate proportions of land masses, and geographical details that could only have been obtained through systematic exploration using sophisticated surveying techniques. But the Antarctic coastlines presented the most puzzling evidence of all. The ice-free shorelines depicted on these ancient maps matched geological surveys showing what the continent looked like before it was covered by ice. This meant that either the maps had been created millions of years ago when Antarctica was still temperate, or they had been drawn by civilizations possessing technology capable of seeing through miles of solid ice to map the bedrock beneath. the United States Air Force took Hapgood's research seriously enough to conduct official evaluations of his findings. Lieutenant Colonel Harold Omeyer, commander of the 8th Reconnaissance Technical Squadron, wrote in 1960 that the geographical detail shown on the Piri Reis map suggested the use of aerial surveying techniques. The accuracy of the coastline depictions, he noted, could not have been achieved through conventional ground-based exploration available in the 16th century. Modern climatologists and glaciologists have confirmed that Antarctica's current ice sheet began forming approximately 34 million years ago, during a period of global cooling known as the Eocene-Oligocene transition. The continent had been steadily accumulating ice ever since, reaching its current thickness of over 2 miles in the interior regions. For the coastlines shown on ancient maps to have been surveyed in an ice-free state, the mapping would have had to occur before this glaciation began, placing it far outside the time frame of any known human civilization. Yet the geographical accuracy of the medieval map suggests not just casual knowledge of Antarctica's existence, but detailed, systematic exploration of its coastlines, inland features, and topographical characteristics. The level of precision visible in these charts would have required extensive surveying expeditions using sophisticated navigational instruments and cartographic techniques. The mystery extends beyond simple geographical knowledge to include understanding of global climate patterns and geological processes. Several historical maps show Antarctica connected to South America by land bridges that geological evidence suggests existed during the last ice age, when sea levels were much lower due to water being locked in continental ice sheets. This knowledge of ancient sea level variations and land connections demonstrates understanding of geological processes that wasn't achieved by modern science until the 20th century. Archaeological evidence from Antarctica itself has done little to resolve the mystery and much to deepen it. The continent's extreme climate has preserved organic materials with extraordinary fidelity, but the ice cover makes systematic archaeological investigation nearly impossible. Most of Antarctica's bedrock remains hidden beneath miles of ice, accessible only through sophisticated drilling operations or remote sensing technology. However, the ice-free valleys of Antarctica, the dry valleys of Victoria Land and similar regions where winds keep the ground clear of snow, have yielded tantalizing clues about the continent's prehistoric past. These valleys contain some of the oldest preserved organic materials on Earth, including ancient bacterial mats and primitive life forms that have survived in dormant states for millions of years. More intriguingly, some researchers have reported finding artificial structures and anomalous objects in these ice-free regions, though such discoveries remain highly controversial and often classified by the various governments that control Antarctic research. The Antarctic Treaty of 1959 established the continent as a scientific preserve, but it also created a complex system of territorial claims and research restrictions that some critics argue has been used to suppress archaeological discoveries that might challenge conventional historical narratives. The few published reports of unusual findings in Antarctica describe stone structures that appear artificially constructed, geometric patterns carved into rock formations, and objects that seem inconsistent with natural geological processes. These reports come primarily from military personnel, research station staff, and satellite imaging analysts who have observed anomalies that don't fit expected patterns of natural formation. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the Antarctic mystery is its implications for human prehistory. If ancient civilizations did possess accurate maps of ice-free Antarctica, it suggests that human technological capabilities were far more advanced in the distant past than conventional archaeology acknowledges. The precision of longitude measurements, the accuracy of geographical proportions, and the detailed knowledge of coastal features all point towards surveying and navigational techniques that seem anachronistic for their supposed time periods. This raises profound questions about the continuity of human civilization and the possibility that advanced societies rose and fell long before the dawn of recorded history. The conventional narrative of steady technological progress from primitive hunter-gatherers to modern industrial civilization may be incomplete, obscuring cycles of advancement and decline that stretch back far deeper into prehistory than we have yet recognized. The Antarctic maps may be evidence of one such lost cycle, a civilization advanced enough to conduct systematic global exploration and sophisticated cartographic surveys, yet somehow forgotten by history and erased from the archaeological record. If such civilizations existed, Antarctica's extreme preservation conditions might hold the only remaining physical evidence of their achievements. The continent's isolation and harsh climate would have made it one of the last places on Earth to be affected by wars, natural disasters, or the other catastrophes that typically erase traces of ancient civilizations. If prehistoric peoples did establish settlements in Antarctica during ice-free periods, the subsequent glaciation would have entombed their remains in a natural deep freeze that could preserve them for millions of years. Modern climate change is beginning to alter the situation. As global temperatures rise and Antarctic ice sheets show signs of instability, previously hidden areas of the continent are becoming accessible for the first time in geological ages. Satellite monitoring has revealed that ice coverage in some regions is retreating, exposing bedrock that hasn't seen sunlight for millions of years. This presents both an unprecedented opportunity and a potential crisis for understanding human prehistory. If ancient civilizations did leave traces in Antarctica, the melting ice might soon reveal archaeological evidence that could revolutionize our understanding of human history. But the same melting process could also destroy delicate artifacts and structures that have survived for millions of years in the stable conditions beneath the ice. The stakes are enormous. Antarctica may hold the key to understanding whether human civilization is truly as young as conventional archaeology suggests, or whether we are the latest iteration in a much older cycle of technological achievement and loss. The impossible knowledge displayed in medieval maps of ice-free Antarctica suggests that somewhere in the deep prehistory of our planet, human or human-like civilizations achieved capabilities that we are only now beginning to match. But to understand what lies beneath the ice, we must first confront when Antarctica became the frozen wasteland it is today. The fossil lay embedded in sandstone on Seymour Island, its delicate structure preserved in exquisite detail after 50 million years entombed in Antarctic rock. But this was no ordinary fossil. It was the remains of a palm frond, complete with individual leaflets and fibrous stem, testament to a time when Antarctica was not the frozen wasteland we know today, but a lush temperate continent covered with forests, rivers, and teeming with life. Dr. Jane Francis, a paleobotanist from the University of Leeds, carefully extracted the specimen from the rock matrix that had protected it through geological ages. Around her, the barren landscape of the Antarctic Peninsula stretched to the horizon, a world of ice, rock, and howling wind. Yet the fossil in her hand spoke of a radically different Antarctica, a green world where palm trees swayed in warm breezes and tropical vegetation flourished under mild skies. The discovery was part of a growing body of evidence that challenged every assumption about Antarctica's climate history. For over a century, explorers and scientists had viewed the continent as Earth's eternal icebox, a realm so hostile and alien that it seemed to exist outside normal biological processes. But paleontological expeditions throughout the 20th and 21st centuries had revealed that Antarctica's frozen desolation was a relatively recent development in geological terms. The fossil record told an extraordinary story of climate transformation that spanned hundreds of millions of years. During the Permian period, approximately 250 million years ago, Antarctica had been home to vast forests of Glossopteris, a seed fern that grew across much of the southern hemisphere. The transantarctic mountains contained layers of coal, compressed ancient vegetation that testified to millions of years of luxuriant plant growth. More remarkably, dinosaur fossils discovered in Antarctica proved that the continent had supported complex ecosystems well into the Mesozoic era. Cryolophosaurus, a large predatory dinosaur found in the transantarctic mountains, had lived approximately 190 million years ago, when Antarctica was positioned much closer to the equator due to continental drift. The climate had been warm enough to support not only vegetation but entire food webs of herbivorous and carnivorous reptiles. But the most surprising discoveries came from more recent geological periods. During the Eocene epoch, approximately 50 million years ago, Antarctica had experienced what climatologists called the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, a period of global warming that had transformed the continent into a temperate paradise. Fossil evidence from this era revealed broadleaf forests, palm trees, and even primitive whales that had lived in coastal waters around Antarctica. The transformation from this green world to the current ice-covered wasteland had occurred with stunning geological rapidity. The Eocene-Oligocene transition, approximately 34 million years ago, marked the beginning of Antarctic glaciation. Within a few million years, an eye blink in geological time, the entire continent had been buried beneath expanding ice sheets that grew steadily thicker and more extensive. But what had caused such a dramatic climate shift? The answer lay in a combination of factors that had transformed Earth's entire climate system. Continental drift had gradually moved Antarctica to its current position over the South Pole, isolating it from the warming influence of ocean currents. As the continent separated from Australia and South America, cold water began circulating around Antarctica in what became known as the circumpolar current, effectively refrigerating the landmass. Simultaneously, atmospheric carbon dioxide levels had been declining due to increased weathering of silicate rocks and the gradual cooling of global temperatures. When atmospheric carbon dioxide fell below a critical threshold, ice began accumulating on Antarctic highlands. The white surface of the growing ice sheets reflected more solar radiation back into space, creating a feedback loop that accelerated cooling and ice accumulation. Dr. Robert DeConto, a climatologist at the University of Massachusetts, had used sophisticated computer models to simulate this climate transition. His research revealed that once the ice sheet formation began, it proceeded with startling speed by geological standards. Within 3 to 4 million years, the ice had grown from isolated highland glaciers to continent-spanning sheets over 2 miles thick. The speed of this transition raised unsettling questions about the stability of ice sheets and the potential for rapid climate change. If Antarctica could transform from a temperate continent to a frozen wasteland in just a few million years, what did that suggest about the potential for equally rapid reversals? The same mechanisms that had caused glaciation could potentially operate in reverse, melting the ice sheets and restoring something resembling the ancient green world. But the implications of Antarctica's climate history extended far beyond academic climatology. If the continent had remained habitable until 34 million years ago, it raised profound questions about the timing of human evolution and the possibility that early human ancestors or other intelligent species might have inhabited Antarctica during its temperate periods. The conventional timeline of human evolution placed the emergence of the first recognizable human ancestors at approximately 7 million years ago in Africa. This meant that Antarctica had been frozen for over 25 million years before even the most primitive human predecessors appeared. According to standard evolutionary theory, no human civilization could have existed in Antarctica because humans hadn't yet evolved when the continent was still habitable. However, some researchers had begun questioning whether the conventional timeline of human evolution was complete. Anomalous fossil discoveries, unexplained archaeological sites, and genetic evidence suggesting more complex patterns of human development all hinted that human prehistory might extend much deeper into the past than currently accepted. If human or proto-human civilizations had existed far earlier than conventional archaeology suggested, Antarctica's temperate period would have provided an ideal environment for technological development. The continent's isolation from other landmasses would have allowed civilizations to develop independently, potentially reaching high levels of sophistication without interference from competing groups or external threats. The geological evidence for such early habitability was compelling. Core samples drilled from Antarctic ice sheets and ocean sediments revealed detailed records of climate conditions stretching back millions of years. These records showed that even after the initial glaciation, Antarctica had experienced periodic warming phases when significant portions of the ice sheet had melted, exposing large areas of habitable land. During the mid-Miocene climatic optimum, approximately 15 million years ago, global temperatures had risen dramatically, causing substantial melting of Antarctic ice sheets. Sea levels had risen by over 100 feet compared to modern levels, but much of Antarctica's interior had become ice-free and potentially habitable. Similar warming periods had occurred multiple times throughout the past 30 million years, creating windows of opportunity for biological colonization. Even more recently, during interglacial periods of the past few million years, substantial portions of Antarctica had experienced temporary warming that melted significant areas of ice cover. The last interglacial period approximately 125,000 years ago, had been warm enough to melt portions of the West Antarctic ice sheet, creating ice-free coastal regions that could have supported human habitation. These periodic warming phases raised intriguing possibilities about the timing of human presence in Antarctica. While conventional archaeology placed the first human migrations to the far southern continents at only 40 to 50,000 years ago, some evidence suggested that human ancestors might have reached extreme southern latitudes much earlier. Controversial archaeological sites in South America had yielded artifacts potentially dating to over 100,000 years ago, well within the time frame when Antarctica might have been partially habitable. If early human populations had indeed reached the southern tip of South America during interglacial periods, the relatively short water gap to Antarctica's peninsula might not have been an insurmountable barrier. The discovery of sophisticated stone tools and evidence of advanced maritime technologies in Patagonia and Tierra del Fuego suggested that prehistoric peoples possessed the navigational skills needed for Antarctic exploration. Some researchers had proposed that during peak interglacial warming, when sea levels were higher and ice coverage reduced, Antarctic coastal regions might have been accessible to early human seafarers, but the most tantalizing evidence came from studies of genetic diversity in isolated populations around the Southern Ocean. Some research suggested that human populations in southern South America, Tasmania and New Zealand showed genetic markers that might indicate contact with now extinct populations from Antarctic or subantarctic regions. The implications were staggering. If humans had indeed inhabited Antarctica during interglacial warming periods, subsequent glaciation would have forced them to either evacuate or adapt to increasingly harsh conditions. Those who remained might have developed sophisticated technologies for surviving in extreme cold, potentially including the advanced surveying and navigation techniques that could account for the accurate geographical knowledge displayed in ancient maps. Underground settlements, artificial heating systems, and preservation technologies would have been essential for survival during the return of glacial conditions. Such adaptations might explain some of the mysterious structures that ground-penetrating radar had detected beneath Antarctic ice sheets. Not natural geological formations, but artificial constructions created by civilizations trying to survive the onset of renewed glaciation. The concept of climate refugees fleeing the gradual freezing of Antarctica also offered potential explanations for sudden advances in human technology and culture that appeared in other regions during prehistoric times. The arrival of sophisticated Antarctic emigrants in South America, Africa, or other continents might have introduced advanced knowledge systems, navigation techniques, and geographical information that subsequently became incorporated into local traditions and eventually found their way into historical maps. Dr. Lloyd Peck, a marine biologist with the British Antarctic Survey, had spent decades studying how Antarctic life forms adapted to extreme cold. His research revealed that many species possessed remarkable abilities to survive freeze-thaw cycles, enter dormant states during hostile conditions, and revive when temperatures improved. These adaptation strategies might have been available to human populations as well, particularly if they had inhabited Antarctica long enough to develop specialized survival techniques. The discovery of extremophile bacteria in Antarctic ice cores proved that life could survive in dormant states for millions of years under the right conditions. If human civilizations had developed technologies for entering similar dormant states, perhaps through controlled hibernation, cryogenic preservation, or other advanced life support systems, they might have survived the onset of glaciation and remained preserved beneath the ice. Such possibilities seemed fantastical, but the fossil record of Antarctica was full of examples of life forms that had survived climate transitions that seemed impossible to endure. The continent's unique preservation conditions had maintained organic materials in nearly perfect condition for millions of years, suggesting that human artifacts and even human remains might be preserved beneath the ice in states that would allow detailed analysis if they were ever recovered. The study of Antarctic paleoclimate was revealing that the continent's climate history was far more complex and dynamic than previously understood. Rather than simply freezing 34 million years ago and remaining frozen ever since, Antarctica had experienced multiple warming and cooling cycles that created windows of habitability extending much more recently into the past. These revelations were forcing climatologists to reconsider their understanding of ice sheet stability and the potential for rapid climate transitions. If Antarctica's ice sheets could grow and shrink dramatically in response to relatively small changes in atmospheric conditions, then current concerns about climate change and ice sheet melting were more urgent than previously recognised. But they also opened extraordinary possibilities for archaeological discovery. As modern climate change began to destabilise Antarctic ice sheets, areas that had been frozen for millions of years were becoming accessible for the first time in geological ages. The melting ice might reveal not only evidence of ancient climates and ecosystems, but potentially artifacts and settlements from civilizations that had once called the Green Continent home. The race was beginning to understand what lay preserved beneath the ice before climate change altered or destroyed evidence that had survived for millions of years in the deep freeze of the world's most isolated continent. Charles Hapgood unrolled the ancient map across his desk at Keene State College. The year was 1956, and the document before him, a copy of the Orontius Phineus map from 1531 AD, displayed geographical knowledge that should have been impossible for any 16th century cartographer to possess. The entire continent of Antarctica was depicted in remarkable detail, complete with mountain ranges, rivers, and coastal features that wouldn't be confirmed by modern explorers for another 400 years. But what made the map truly extraordinary was not just its accuracy. It was what it revealed about the source of that accuracy. The Antarctic coastline was shown as it would appear, without any ice cover whatsoever, revealing the actual bedrock topography that lay hidden beneath miles of accumulated glacial ice. Modern satellite surveys and ground-penetrating radar had confirmed that the geographical features shown on the ancient map matched the underlying rock formations with uncanny precision. Hapgood had spent years collecting and analysing similar cartographic anomalies from libraries and archives across Europe and the Middle East. The pattern that emerged was both consistent and deeply troubling. Multiple ancient and medieval maps displayed accurate knowledge of global geography that far exceeded what conventional history suggested was possible for their respective time periods. The Peary Race map of 1513 AD showed not only the ice-free coastline of Antarctica, but also the Caribbean islands with precise longitude measurements, a navigational technique that wouldn't be mastered by European sailors until the invention of accurate chronometers over 2 centuries later. The Mercator map of 1569 AD depicted Antarctica as an ice-free continent with clear river systems and inland geographical features. The Boitsch map of 1754 AD showed the continent exactly as it would appear if all ice were removed, revealing a landscape that wouldn't be confirmed until ground-penetrating radar surveys of the late 20th century. Most unsettling of all was the Dulcet Portolano of 1339 AD, which displayed the Mediterranean and Black Sea coastlines with an accuracy that rivaled modern satellite photography. The map showed correct longitude measurements across thousands of miles, an achievement that required knowledge of Earth's precise circumference and access to accurate timekeeping methods that medieval civilization supposedly did not possess. The implications were staggering. Either multiple independent civilizations throughout history had possessed advanced surveying and navigation technologies that had subsequently been lost, or they had all drawn from common source materials that preserved geographical knowledge from some much earlier and more sophisticated civilization. Hapgood's research attracted attention from unexpected quarters. The United States Air Force commissioned official evaluations of his findings, recognizing that the geographical accuracy of ancient maps might have implications for understanding historical navigation capabilities and potential security concerns. Lieutenant Colonel Harold Ohlmeyer, commander of the 8th Reconnaissance Technical Squadron, conducted detailed analysis of the Peary Rice map's Antarctic coastline depictions. Ohlmeyer's conclusions were remarkable. The coastal features shown on the 16th century map could only have been surveyed using aerial reconnaissance techniques. The accuracy of the geographical relationships, the correct proportions of landmasses, and the precise positioning of coastal indentations all suggested mapping from elevated perspectives that wouldn't have been available to ground-based explorers using conventional medieval technologies. The Air Force analysis revealed additional anomalies that strengthened the case for advanced source materials. The maps showed understanding of spherical trigonometry and mathematical projections that weren't developed by European cartographers until the Renaissance. More remarkably, they displayed knowledge of magnetic declination, the difference between magnetic north and true north, that varied correctly across different geographical regions, indicating systematic magnetic surveys of global scope. But perhaps the most puzzling aspect of the ancient maps was their treatment of Antarctica's relationship to other continents. Several maps showed land bridges connecting Antarctica to South America that geological evidence confirmed had existed during the last ice age, when sea levels were approximately 400 feet lower than current levels. This knowledge of ancient sea level variations and continental connections demonstrated understanding of glacial cycles and geological processes that wasn't achieved by modern science until the 20th century. The Zeno map of 1380 AD displayed even more anomalous features, showing Greenland's coastline free of ice and depicting Arctic regions with geographical accuracy that wouldn't be achieved by European explorers until the 19th century. The map included details of inland lakes, mountain ranges, and river systems in Greenland that were confirmed only by 20th century aerial surveys and ice-penetrating radar. These cartographic mysteries extended beyond the polar regions to encompass global geographical knowledge that seemed anachronistic for its supposed time period. Ancient maps of the Atlantic Ocean showed mid-ocean ridge systems that weren't discovered by modern oceanography until the 1950s. Medieval charts of the Pacific displayed island chains and ocean currents with accuracy that suggested systematic exploration using advanced navigational techniques. Dr. Eric von Daniken, though controversial in his interpretations, had compiled extensive documentation of ancient technological anomalies that complemented the cartographic evidence. His research revealed that multiple ancient cultures had possessed knowledge of astronomical cycles, mathematical constants, and engineering principles that seemed inconsistent with their supposed technological capabilities. The Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a shipwreck off the Greek coast, demonstrated that ancient Mediterranean civilizations had possessed mechanical computing devices capable of predicting astronomical events with extraordinary precision. The device, dating to approximately 100 BC, contained gear systems and mathematical relationships that weren't duplicated by European technology until the development of medieval clockwork over 1,000 years later. Similar technological sophistication appeared in unexpected contexts throughout the ancient world. The construction of massive stone monuments like the pyramids of Giza, Stonehenge, and the megalithic complexes of South America all required engineering knowledge and organizational capabilities that seemed to exceed what conventional archaeology attributed to their builders. But the cartographic evidence was particularly compelling because it involved practical knowledge that would have required systematic exploration and survey work. Unlike theoretical, astronomical, or mathematical knowledge that might have been derived through purely intellectual activity, accurate maps required direct observation of geographical features across vast distances. The logistics of creating accurate maps of ice-free Antarctica would have been staggering by any pre-modern standard. Survey teams would have needed to explore thousands of miles of coastline, measure inland topographical features, and coordinate their observations using sophisticated mathematical techniques. The scale of such an undertaking would have required substantial naval capabilities, advanced navigation instruments, and organizational structures capable of managing multi-year exploration projects. Yet the evidence suggested that such exploration had indeed occurred. The maps showed not just general coastal outlines, but specific geographical details that could only have been observed through direct reconnaissance. Bays, peninsulas, river mouths, and mountain ranges were positioned with accuracy that indicated systematic surveying rather than speculative reconstruction. The question of when such exploration might have occurred became increasingly complex as researchers examined the climatic constraints involved. Antarctica's last major ice-free period had ended approximately 34 million years ago, far predating any known human civilization. However, the geological record revealed that even after the initial glaciation, Antarctica had experienced periodic warming phases when substantial areas of coastline became accessible. The most recent such warming had occurred during the medieval warm period, approximately 1000 to 1200 AD, when global temperatures rose sufficiently to reduce ice coverage in many polar regions. Some researchers speculated that during this period, advanced maritime civilizations might have gained access to Antarctic coastal areas that had been ice-free for the first time in millions of years. But this explanation raised its own puzzles. The medieval warm period was well documented in European historical records, yet there was no mention of Antarctic exploration or discovery of a previously unknown continent. If medieval civilizations had possessed the naval capabilities needed to reach Antarctica and conduct systematic geographical surveys, why had they left no historical records of such extraordinary achievements? Alternative explanations proposed that the accurate geographical knowledge preserved in ancient maps had been transmitted through oral traditions or written records from much earlier civilizations that had subsequently been lost to history. According to this theory, advanced prehistoric societies had conducted the original surveys during earlier warming periods, and their geographical knowledge had been preserved and transmitted through generations of mapmakers, despite the loss of the original source civilizations. The concept of lost advanced civilizations was gaining support from archaeological discoveries that challenge conventional timelines of human technological development. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, dated to approximately 9600 BC, demonstrated that sophisticated monument building capabilities had existed thousands of years earlier than previously recognized. The site's complex astronomical alignments and advanced stonework suggested organizational and technical capabilities that seemed inconsistent with the hunter-gatherer societies that supposedly predominated during that period. Similar anomalies appeared in underwater archaeology. Submerged structures off the coasts of Japan, India, and the Mediterranean showed evidence of sophisticated urban planning and monumental construction that predated the supposed development of advanced civilizations by thousands of years. The structures had been submerged by rising sea levels following the last ice age, suggesting that advanced societies had existed during glacial periods when geography would have been dramatically different from the modern world. The possibility that advanced civilizations had existed during ice ages opened new perspectives on the Antarctic mapping problem. During glacial maximum periods, when sea levels were hundreds of feet lower than current levels, many areas of Antarctica that are now beneath ice or water would have been exposed and potentially habitable. Land bridges would have connected continents that are now separated by water, making global exploration more feasible than it would be today. Advanced Ice Age civilizations would have had access to geographical features and continental configurations that had been hidden by subsequent climate change. Their maps would preserve knowledge of a world that had been fundamentally transformed by rising sea levels and advancing ice sheets, explaining why ancient cartographic knowledge seemed so inconsistent with post-glacial geography. The preservation of such ancient geographical knowledge through the catastrophic transition from Ice Age to modern climatic conditions would have required extraordinary dedication to maintaining and transmitting accurate information. The civilizations responsible for creating the original surveys would have needed to recognize the importance of preserving geographical knowledge even as their own societies faced extinction from climate change. This scenario suggested a level of long-term thinking and cultural commitment that seemed almost incomprehensible by modern standards. Ancient cartographers would have been preserving knowledge not for immediate practical use, but for the benefit of future civilizations that might not emerge for thousands of years. The accuracy with which geographical information was maintained across such vast time periods indicated systematic efforts to prevent the loss of crucial knowledge through periods of social collapse and technological regression. The implications extended beyond simple geographical knowledge to encompass understanding of global climate systems, geological processes, and astronomical cycles that operated on timescales far exceeding individual human lifespans. The civilizations responsible for creating the original source maps would have needed to think in terms of geological time, recognizing patterns and relationships that only became apparent across millennia of systematic observation. Such long-term perspectives might explain some of the apparent technological sophistication displayed in ancient monuments and artifacts. If prehistoric civilizations had indeed possessed advanced geographical and astronomical knowledge, they might also have developed technologies for preserving that knowledge through periods of social disruption and climate change. The search for evidence of such preservation technologies led researchers to examine unusual features of ancient monuments and artifacts that seemed designed for long-term information storage. Stone monuments with astronomical alignments might have served as permanent calendars and observatories. Mathematical relationships embedded in architectural proportions could preserve numerical constants, and geometric principles Symbolic systems carved in stone might encode geographical coordinates and navigation information. But the most intriguing possibility was that geographical knowledge might have been preserved in locations that remained accessible throughout climate transitions, places where information could be stored and retrieved even after the societies that created it had vanished. Underground chambers, protected valleys, or other geologically stable locations might contain archives of ancient knowledge that had survived for thousands of years, waiting to be rediscovered by later civilizations. Antarctica itself, with its unique preservation conditions and geological stability, might harbour such archives. The same ice that had buried evidence of ancient habitability might also have protected libraries, repositories, and knowledge storage systems from prehistoric civilizations. As modern climate change began to destabilize Antarctic ice sheets, these ancient archives might finally become accessible for the first time in thousands of years. The radar pulse penetrated the ice with surgical precision, sending electromagnetic waves 2 miles down through the frozen heart of Antarctica before bouncing back from the hidden bedrock below. In the control room of the research station, Dr. Robin Bell watched as her computer screen painted a three-dimensional image of what lay beneath the world's thickest ice sheet. What she saw defied every expectation about the landscape hidden under Antarctica's frozen surface. The bedrock revealed by the ground-penetrating radar was not the smooth, weathered plain that geologists had expected. Instead, it showed a complex topography of mountains, valleys, and most remarkably geometric structures that appeared almost too regular to be natural. Sharp angles, parallel lines, and symmetrical patterns emerged from the data with a clarity that suggested artificial construction, rather than random geological processes. Dr. Bell, a geophysicist at Columbia University's Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, had spent decades using radar technology to map subglacial Antarctic terrain. Her team's discoveries had revolutionized understanding of what lay beneath the ice, revealing vast underground lake systems, ancient river networks, and geological formations that challenged conventional assumptions about Antarctic geology. But the structures appearing on her latest surveys were unlike anything she had encountered in 20 years of polar research. The anomalies appeared across multiple sites throughout Antarctica, but were particularly concentrated in regions of the continent that ancient maps had identified as significant geographical features. The correlation between medieval cartographic depictions and modern radar discoveries was too precise to be coincidental. Areas that 16th century maps had shown as mountain ranges, river valleys, and coastal features were revealing artificial structures that seemed to confirm the impossible geographical knowledge preserved in ancient charts. The most striking discoveries came from surveys of the transantarctic mountains, where radar penetration revealed what appeared to be artificial tunnels and chambers carved into solid rock beneath miles of ice. The structures showed engineering characteristics that suggested deliberate construction: smooth walls, precise geometric shapes, and interconnected passages that formed complex underground networks. Dr. Michael Studinger, a geophysicist with NASA's Operation Icebridge, had conducted aerial radar surveys that revealed similar anomalies across vast areas of Antarctica. His high-resolution imaging showed structures that appeared to be foundations of large buildings, walls arranged in geometric patterns, and what looked like roads or pathways connecting different artificial complexes. The NASA surveys, conducted using sophisticated airborne radar systems, provided unprecedented detail about subglacial Antarctic topography. The technology could penetrate ice up to 3 miles thick and resolve features as small as a few meters across. The images it produced revealed a hidden landscape that bore little resemblance to the sterile, uniform terrain that scientists had expected to find beneath the ice. Instead, the subglacial topography showed clear evidence of systematic modification by forces that operated according to geometric principles rather than random natural processes. Long, straight features cut across natural terrain in patterns that suggested planned construction. Circular and rectangular structures appeared isolated or in clusters that resembled urban planning layouts. But perhaps the most compelling evidence came from surveys of subglacial Lake Vostok, a body of liquid water the size of Lake Ontario that had remained isolated beneath the Antarctic ice sheet for millions of years. Radar imaging of the lake's surroundings revealed structures on the lake floor that appeared to be artificial constructions. including what looked like pyramidal shapes and linear features arranged in geometric patterns, the discovery of structures beneath Lake Vostok was particularly significant because the lake had been completely sealed off from the surface world for at least 15 million years. Any artificial constructions found there would predate the formation of the current ice sheet, suggesting that advanced engineering had occurred in Antarctica when the continent was still ice-free. Dr. Valery Lukin, head of Russia's Antarctic research program, had overseen the drilling operations that finally breached Lake Vostok's ice seal in 2012. The samples retrieved from the lake contained microbial life forms that had been isolated for geological ages, but they also revealed chemical signatures and mineral compositions that seemed inconsistent with purely natural lake formation processes. The chemical analysis of Vostok water samples showed trace elements and isotopic ratios that suggested contact with artificial materials or industrial processes. While Russian authorities attributed these findings to contamination from drilling operations, some researchers speculated that the anomalous chemistry might indicate interaction between lake water and submerged artificial structures. Similar chemical anomalies appeared in ice core samples from other locations across Antarctica. The European Project for Ice Coring in Antarctica, or EPICA, had drilled cores that provided detailed records of atmospheric composition stretching back 800,000 years. Hidden within this climate data were chemical signatures that seemed to indicate brief periods of industrial activity occurring at times when no known technological civilizations existed anywhere on Earth. The ice core data showed spikes in atmospheric metals, unusual isotopic ratios, and trace compounds that resembled the chemical signatures of advanced metallurgy or energy production. These anomalies appeared at irregular intervals throughout the geological record, suggesting that technological activity had occurred in Antarctica multiple times during the past million years. Dr. Jérôme Chapelaz, a glaciologist with the French National Centre for Scientific Research, had initially dismissed these chemical anomalies as contamination or measurement errors. But as similar findings appeared in ice cores from widely separated drilling sites, he began to consider the possibility that they might represent genuine traces of prehistoric technological activity. The timing of the chemical anomalies correlated with known warming periods in Antarctica's climate history. During interglacial phases, when ice coverage was reduced and portions of the continent became temporarily habitable, the ice core data showed increased levels of industrial metals and complex organic compounds that suggested technological activity. Ground-penetrating radar surveys of the dry valleys, the few ice-free regions of Antarctica, revealed additional evidence of artificial structures. These valleys, kept clear of ice by strong katabatic winds, provided the only direct access to Antarctic bedrock without the need for drilling through miles of ice. What researchers found there challenged every assumption about Antarctica's prehistoric past. The valleys contained stone structures that appeared to be artificially constructed, including walls, foundations, and what looked like remnants of large buildings. The construction techniques showed sophisticated understanding of engineering principles, with precisely fitted stones and architectural features that seemed designed to withstand extreme weather conditions. Dr. David Marchant, a glacial geologist at Boston University, had studied the dry valleys for decades and was among the first to recognize that some of the stone formations were artificial rather than natural. His analysis revealed that the structures showed clear evidence of planning and construction techniques that required advanced organizational capabilities. The age of these structures was difficult to determine because traditional dating methods were complicated by Antarctica's unique preservation conditions. However, geological analysis suggested that some of the constructions were extremely ancient, possibly predating the current ice sheet formation by millions of years. Even more intriguing were the geometric patterns carved into bedrock throughout the dry valleys. These petroglyphs showed mathematical relationships, astronomical alignments, and symbolic systems that seemed to encode sophisticated knowledge about celestial mechanics and geographical relationships. The precision of the astronomical alignments suggested that their creators had possessed advanced understanding of Earth's rotation, orbital mechanics, and long-term climate cycles. Satellite imagery analysis had revealed additional anomalies across Antarctica that were visible even from space. High-resolution photographs showed geometric patterns in ice coverage, linear features that cut across natural terrain, and areas where ice thickness varied in ways that suggested underlying artificial structures. The Google Earth platform had made high-resolution Antarctic imagery accessible to independent researchers worldwide, leading to numerous discoveries of anomalous features that had escaped notice by official scientific surveys. Civilian analysts identified what appeared to be artificial structures, geometric patterns, and architectural features visible through thin ice or partially exposed by wind erosion. While many of these discoveries were dismissed by mainstream researchers as pareidolia, the tendency to perceive meaningful patterns in random data, some showed characteristics that were difficult to explain through natural processes alone. Perfectly straight lines extending for miles, circular formations with geometric precision, and rectangular features that appeared to be building foundations all suggested artificial origin. The accumulation of evidence from multiple independent sources, ground-penetrating radar, ice core chemistry, geological surveys and satellite imagery, was beginning to paint a consistent picture of Antarctic anomalies that challenge conventional understanding of the continent's history. Rather than being a sterile wasteland that had remained frozen for millions of years, Antarctica appeared to harbour extensive evidence of artificial structures and technological activity. But perhaps the most remarkable discovery came from analysis of magnetic anomalies beneath the Antarctic ice sheet. Magnetometer surveys revealed unusual magnetic signatures that suggested the presence of large metallic structures or industrial installations buried beneath the ice. The magnetic patterns showed geometric regularity and artificial characteristics that seemed inconsistent with natural geological processes. Dr. Ralph von Fries, a geophysicist at Ohio State University, had used satellite magnetometer data to map magnetic anomalies across Antarctica. His surveys revealed what appeared to be massive metallic structures buried beneath the ice in the Wilkes Land region, structures so large that they created magnetic signatures detectable from orbit. The Wilkes Land magnetic anomaly showed characteristics that suggested a metallic object over 300 miles in diameter buried beneath the ice sheet. The magnetic signature was unlike any known geological formation and resembled the kind of magnetic field that would be created by a large artificial structure made of ferrous metals. Some researchers speculated that the magnetic anomaly might indicate the remains of an ancient technological installation, perhaps a massive industrial complex or transportation infrastructure that had been buried by advancing ice sheets millions of years ago. The size and magnetic characteristics of the structure suggested engineering capabilities that far exceeded anything achieved by known historical civilizations. Ground-penetrating radar surveys in the Wilkes Land region had detected artificial structures that appeared to be connected to the larger magnetic anomaly. The radar imaging showed geometric patterns, tunnel systems, and what looked like building foundations arranged in complex networks that extended deep beneath the ice. The discovery of apparently artificial structures throughout Antarctica was forcing researchers to reconsider fundamental assumptions about the continent's history and the timeline of human technological development. If the structures were indeed artificial, they suggested that advanced civilizations had existed in Antarctica when the continent was habitable, potentially millions of years before conventional archaeology placed the emergence of sophisticated human societies. The implications were staggering. Rather than being Earth's most isolated and sterile continent, Antarctica might harbour the remains of the most advanced prehistoric civilization in human history. The same ice that had buried evidence of this civilization had also preserved it in nearly perfect condition, creating a frozen archaeological site of unprecedented scope and importance. But accessing this potential treasure trove of prehistoric artifacts and structures remained extraordinarily challenging. The ice covering most artificial anomalies was miles thick and would require massive drilling operations to penetrate. Even if such operations were technically feasible, they would be enormously expensive and would require international cooperation on a scale that had never been achieved for purely archaeological purposes. The political implications were equally complex. Antarctica was governed by the Antarctic Treaty System, which reserved the continent for peaceful scientific research, but also established territorial claims by various nations. The discovery of significant archaeological sites might trigger competing claims and disputes that could destabilize the current treaty framework. Some researchers suspected that evidence of Antarctic archaeological sites was being suppressed by government agencies that recognized the potentially destabilizing implications of such discoveries. The classification of certain Antarctic regions as restricted or off-limits to civilian researchers might indicate official knowledge of sensitive archaeological sites that were being kept from public scrutiny. But as ice coverage continued to decrease due to climate change, previously hidden areas of Antarctica were becoming exposed for the first time in millions of years. The retreating ice was beginning to reveal surface features that had been buried since before the emergence of human civilization, creating unprecedented opportunities for archaeological investigation. The race was beginning to understand what lay hidden beneath Antarctica's ice, before climate change either exposed or destroyed evidence that had survived for millions of years in the world's greatest natural freezer. What researchers were discovering suggested that Antarctica might hold the key to understanding advanced prehistoric civilizations whose existence would fundamentally rewrite human history. The photograph arrived at the National Science Foundation with a classification level that prevented its immediate publication. Taken by a reconnaissance team during a routine geological survey in the Transantarctic Mountains, it showed something that should not have existed in Antarctica's pristine wilderness: a massive stone structure, partially exposed by wind erosion, displaying architectural features that seemed impossibly sophisticated for any known prehistoric culture. The structure consisted of precisely fitted megalithic blocks, some weighing several tons, arranged in geometric patterns that demonstrated advanced understanding of engineering principles. The stonework showed characteristics similar to the most sophisticated ancient constructions found in Peru, Egypt, and other locations associated with advanced prehistoric civilizations. But this structure was located thousands of miles from any known center of ancient culture, in a region that had supposedly been uninhabitable for millions of years. Dr. Charles Bentley, a glaciologist who had spent decades studying Antarctic geology, was among the first researchers granted access to the classified photographs. His initial reaction was skepticism. Antarctica's extreme conditions made it seem impossible that sophisticated stone structures could have survived exposure to millions of years of ice, wind, and temperature variations. But detailed analysis of the images revealed engineering techniques and architectural features that were difficult to explain through natural processes. The megalithic blocks showed evidence of precise cutting and fitting techniques that required advanced tools and mathematical knowledge. The surfaces were smooth and uniform, with tolerances that matched the most sophisticated ancient stonework found anywhere in the world. Joint lines between blocks were so precise that a knife blade couldn't be inserted between them, despite the enormous size and weight of individual stones. More remarkable was the apparent age of the structures. Geological analysis of the surrounding terrain suggested that the stonework predated the formation of the current ice sheet, meaning it had somehow survived burial under miles of ice for millions of years. The preservation was so complete that detailed architectural features remained clearly visible, suggesting that Antarctic conditions had essentially freeze-dried the structures in place. The discovery triggered a classified archaeological expedition led by a joint team of researchers from the United States Antarctic Program and international collaborators. Their mission was to conduct detailed documentation of the site while maintaining strict secrecy about their findings. What they discovered exceeded even the most optimistic expectations about Antarctic archaeology. The site contained not just isolated structures, but an entire complex of interconnected buildings, walls, and architectural features that extended far beyond the initially photographed area. Ground-penetrating radar revealed that the visible structures were only a small portion of a much larger complex that remained buried beneath accumulated ice and debris. The architectural style was unlike anything found in other parts of the world, yet it showed clear evidence of advanced planning and construction techniques. Buildings were arranged in geometric patterns that seemed designed to optimize solar heating and provide protection from Antarctic winds. Walls were oriented to channel airflow and create microclimates that would have been more suitable for human habitation. But perhaps the most extraordinary discovery was evidence of sophisticated heating systems built into the structures. Channels carved into stone floors appeared to have carried heated air or water throughout the buildings, creating what amounted to ancient central heating systems. The engineering required to design and construct such systems demonstrated technological capabilities that seemed anachronistic for any known prehistoric period. Dating the structures proved extremely challenging due to Antarctica's unique preservation conditions. Traditional carbon-14 dating was impossible, because organic materials were almost entirely absent from the site. However, analysis of weathering patterns, ice accumulation layers, and geological context suggested that the structures were extremely ancient, possibly predating any known human civilization by millions of years. The team also discovered artifacts within the structures that provided additional evidence of advanced technological capabilities. Stone tools showed precision manufacturing techniques that required sophisticated understanding of materials science and engineering principles. Carved symbols and decorative elements demonstrated artistic sophistication and possibly written language systems that had never been encountered in any other archaeological context. Most intriguingly, some artifacts showed evidence of metal working techniques that shouldn't have been available to prehistoric cultures. Traces of refined metals embedded in stone surfaces suggested that the builders had possessed advanced metallurgy capabilities, including the ability to smelt and work metals that required high-temperature furnaces and sophisticated chemical knowledge. The metal traces also provided potential clues about the timeline of habitation. Isotopic analysis of metallic residues suggested that some of the metallurgy had occurred relatively recently in geological terms, possibly within the last few 100,000 years rather than millions. This timeline would place the Antarctic civilization within the potential range of advanced human cultures, though still far predating any known historical civilizations. Biological evidence from the site added another layer of mystery to the Antarctic archaeological complex. Preserved organic materials found within the structures included plant and animal remains that seemed inconsistent with Antarctica's current climate and ecology. Pollen samples suggested that the site had been inhabited when Antarctica supported temperate vegetation, including trees and flowering plants that could not survive in current Antarctic conditions. Even more remarkable were preserved biological specimens that appeared to represent unknown species or subspecies of plants and animals. Some organic remains showed characteristics that seemed to indicate genetic modification or selective breeding programs that would have required sophisticated understanding of biological principles. Dr. Svante Pääbo, a paleogeneticist at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology, was secretly consulted to analyze biological samples from the Antarctic site. His preliminary findings suggested that some specimens contained genetic sequences that didn't match any known species in existing biological databases. The genetic analysis revealed evidence of what appeared to be engineered organisms, plants and animals that had been modified through techniques that resembled modern genetic engineering. The modifications included enhanced cold tolerance, accelerated growth rates, and other characteristics that would have been advantageous for survival in challenging Antarctic conditions. But the most shocking discovery was genetic evidence suggesting the presence of human or human-like inhabitants at the Antarctic site. DNA extracted from organic materials within the structures showed human genetic markers, but with variations that didn't match any known human populations. The genetic sequences suggested either an unknown human subspecies or humans who had undergone systematic genetic modification. The implications were staggering. If humans had indeed inhabited Antarctica during prehistoric periods, it would fundamentally challenge conventional understanding of human evolution and migration patterns. The genetic evidence suggested not just human presence, but human populations that had achieved technological capabilities far exceeding anything attributed to prehistoric cultures. Meanwhile, independent researchers using satellite imagery and publicly available data were making their own discoveries of Antarctic anomalies. Google Earth analysis had revealed numerous geometric features and artificial-looking structures scattered across the continent, many in regions that were officially restricted to scientific research. Linda Moulton Howe, an investigative journalist specializing in unexplained phenomena, had compiled extensive documentation of Antarctic anomalies visible in satellite imagery. Her research revealed patterns of artificial-looking structures, geometric formations, and architectural features that suggested widespread construction activity across multiple regions of the continent. Howe's investigations also uncovered testimony from former military personnel and scientific staff who claimed to have witnessed or heard reports of significant archaeological discoveries in Antarctica. According to these accounts, multiple governments were aware of extensive artificial structures beneath the Antarctic ice, but were maintaining secrecy about their existence to prevent international disputes over territorial claims and archaeological resources. The whistleblower accounts described underground complexes of enormous scale, including tunnel systems that extended for hundreds of miles beneath the ice sheet. Some accounts claim that portions of these underground systems were still accessible and contained preserved artifacts, technological devices, and even structures that appeared to be functional after millions of years of preservation in Antarctic conditions. Brian, a former Navy electronics technician who requested that his last name be withheld, claimed to have participated in classified missions to Antarctic archaeological sites during the 1980s. According to his account, military teams had discovered extensive underground complexes that contained technology far in advance of anything available to modern civilization. Brian's testimony described structures that appeared to be made of materials unknown to modern science, including substances that remained flexible and strong despite their extreme age. He reported seeing rooms that still contained functional lighting systems powered by unknown energy sources, and control panels that appeared to be technological interfaces despite their apparent prehistoric origin. The accounts were impossible to verify independently due to the classified nature of the alleged discoveries and the restricted access to relevant Antarctic regions. However, the consistency of reports from multiple independent sources suggested that significant archaeological discoveries had indeed been made in Antarctica, even if their exact nature remained unknown to the general public. Analysis of declassified documents from various government agencies revealed that official interest in Antarctic anomalies extended back decades. Military reconnaissance missions, geological surveys, and scientific expeditions had repeatedly identified features that were described in coded language as geological anomalies, unusual formations, or features requiring further investigation. The pattern of official secrecy surrounding Antarctic discoveries suggested that governments recognized the potentially destabilizing implications of confirming the existence of advanced prehistoric civilizations. The discovery of technological artifacts or architectural complexes that predated known human civilizations by millions of years would challenge fundamental assumptions about human evolution, technological development, and our species' place in planetary history. But secrecy was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain as climate change began to expose previously hidden areas of Antarctica. Retreating ice sheets were revealing surface features that had been buried for millennia, creating opportunities for independent observation and analysis that were difficult for authorities to control. Civilian researchers using commercially available satellite imagery were discovering and documenting Antarctic anomalies at an accelerating rate. The democratization of satellite technology and image analysis tools was making it possible for independent investigators to conduct their own surveys of Antarctic terrain and identify features that seemed inconsistent with natural geological processes. The accumulating evidence from official archaeological expeditions, whistleblower testimony, satellite imagery analysis, and geological surveys was beginning to paint a consistent picture of Antarctic anomalies that suggested extensive prehistoric occupation by technologically advanced civilizations. The scale of the apparent archaeological sites exceeded anything found elsewhere in the world, suggesting that Antarctica might have been home to the most sophisticated prehistoric culture in human history. But the same ice that had preserved evidence of this civilization for millions of years was now beginning to melt due to climate change, creating both unprecedented opportunities for discovery and urgent risks of losing irreplaceable archaeological evidence. The race was beginning to understand and document Antarctica's hidden civilization before climate change either exposed or destroyed the most important archaeological site in human history. The implications extended far beyond academic archaeology to encompass fundamental questions about human origins, technological development, and our species' relationship with planetary climate cycles. If advanced civilizations had indeed flourished in Antarctica during prehistoric periods, their ultimate fate might provide crucial insights into the long-term sustainability of technological societies and the risks posed by global climate change. The evidence suggested that Antarctica's hidden civilization had not simply vanished, but had been buried and preserved by the same climate transitions that now threatened to expose and potentially destroy their remains. Understanding what had happened to Antarctica's prehistoric inhabitants might be crucial for ensuring that modern civilization could avoid a similar fate. The ice core told a story of catastrophe written in layers of frozen time. Extracted from depths of over 2 miles beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, each annual layer preserved atmospheric conditions from Earth's distant past with the precision of a historical archive. But within the core's crystalline structure, researchers had discovered evidence of an event so catastrophic that it had fundamentally altered the planet's climate system and buried an entire civilization beneath miles of accumulating ice. Dr. Lonnie Thompson, a paleoclimatologist at Ohio State University, held the ice sample up to the laboratory light, examining the distinctive dark band that marked the transition between two radically different climate regimes. Above the band, the ice showed characteristics consistent with a temperate climate, evidence of moderate precipitation, seasonal variation, and atmospheric chemistry that indicated a world capable of supporting complex ecosystems. Below the band, the ice revealed a different planet entirely, one locked in perpetual winter, with atmospheric conditions that suggested the onset of the most severe glaciation in Earth's history. The transition between these climate states had occurred with stunning rapidity by geological standards. Rather than the gradual cooling that climatologists had expected to find, the ice core data revealed that Antarctica had plunged from temperate conditions to permanent glaciation within a matter of decades. The speed of this climate shift was almost inconceivable, faster than anything in the known geological record, yet preserved with undeniable clarity in the layered testimony of ancient ice. What could have caused such a rapid and complete climate transformation? The answer lay in a combination of factors that had converged to create the perfect storm of global cooling. But the more researchers studied the evidence, the more they began to suspect that the catastrophe might not have been entirely natural. The timing of Antarctica's rapid glaciation coincided with geological evidence of massive cosmic impacts that had occurred approximately 34 million years ago during the Eocene-Oligocene transition. Iridium anomalies in geological layers from this period indicated that multiple large asteroids or comets had struck Earth within a relatively short time frame, creating global climate disruption through dust and debris thrown into the atmosphere. Dr. Christian Koebel, a geochemist at the University of Vienna, had spent years analysing impact crater formations and their relationship to mass extinction events. His research revealed that the late Eocene period had witnessed an unusual clustering of large impact events, including the formation of several major crater systems that suggested a bombardment period unlike anything in more recent geological history. The Chesapeake Bay crater, the Popogai crater in Russia, and several other major impact sites all dated to the same narrow time window when Antarctica's climate had undergone its catastrophic transformation. The combined effects of these multiple impacts would have injected enormous quantities of dust, ash and debris into Earth's atmosphere, blocking solar radiation and triggering rapid global cooling. But the impact hypothesis alone couldn't account for the permanence of Antarctica's glaciation. Previous impact events had caused temporary climate disruptions lasting thousands or tens of thousands of years, but the effects had eventually reversed as atmospheric conditions normalized. Antarctica's transition to permanent ice coverage suggested that the cosmic impacts had triggered cascading feedback mechanisms that prevented climate recovery. The key lay in Antarctica's unique geographical position. As the continent had drifted over the South Pole through continental drift, it had become isolated from warming ocean currents that moderated climate in other polar regions. When cosmic impacts triggered initial cooling and ice formation, the white surface of expanding ice sheets began reflecting more solar radiation back into space, creating a feedback loop that accelerated further cooling and ice accumulation. Dr. Robert DeConto's climate models revealed that once this ice albedo feedback mechanism began operating, it could sustain permanent glaciation even after atmospheric conditions returned to normal. The initial cosmic impacts had pushed Antarctica's climate across a tipping point from which recovery became impossible without external intervention. But the most intriguing aspect of the climate catastrophe was evidence suggesting that it might not have been entirely accidental. Analysis of impact crater patterns and trajectories suggested that some of the cosmic objects might have been artificially directed toward Earth, rather than representing random asteroid or comet encounters. The orbital mechanics of the impact events showed characteristics that seemed inconsistent with natural celestial mechanics. Several objects had approached Earth from unusual angles and trajectories that suggested they had been deliberately targeted toward specific geographical regions. The concentration of impacts during a narrow time window also seems statistically improbable for random cosmic encounters. Some researchers speculated that the impacts might have been weapons employed during an ancient interplanetary conflict, perhaps a war between Earth-based civilizations and extraterrestrial powers, or conflicts between different factions of advanced terrestrial civilizations that possess space-based capabilities. The systematic targeting of impact events toward regions that would maximize climate disruption suggested strategic planning rather than cosmic coincidence. Alternative theories propose that the impacts might have been attempts by advanced civilizations to prevent or mitigate some other catastrophic threat. Perhaps prehistoric scientists had attempted to use controlled cosmic impacts to alter Earth's orbit, adjust atmospheric composition, or deflect an even more dangerous cosmic threat. The climate catastrophe might have been an unintended consequence of desperate protective measures, rather than an act of warfare. But regardless of whether the impacts were natural, artificial, or somewhere between, their effects on Antarctica's prehistoric civilization would have been devastating. The archaeological evidence suggested that sophisticated societies had flourished on the continent during its temperate period, developing advanced technologies and architectural achievements that rivaled or exceeded anything known from historical civilizations. The rapid onset of glaciation would have given these civilizations little time to adapt or evacuate. Within decades, temperatures would have plummeted below the threshold for human survival. Precipitation would have shifted from rain to snow, accumulating faster than it could melt, and beginning the process of burial that would eventually entomb entire cities beneath miles of ice. Evidence from the archaeological sites suggested that Antarctic civilizations had recognized the approaching catastrophe and attempted to implement survival strategies. The sophisticated heating systems built into their structures indicated preparation for severe cooling. Underground construction and tunnel systems might have been attempts to create protected environments that could survive surface glaciation. Some structures showed evidence of rapid modification and reinforcement, as if their builders had been racing against time to adapt their architecture for survival in increasingly harsh conditions. Storage chambers contained preserved supplies that suggested preparation for extended periods of isolation and resource scarcity. Technological artifacts showed signs of being designed or modified for operation in extreme cold conditions. But the scale of the climate catastrophe ultimately overwhelmed any defensive measures that prehistoric Antarctic civilizations might have implemented. The ice cores revealed that temperatures had dropped below survivable levels within a few decades, and precipitation rates had increased to levels that would have made surface survival impossible, even for the most cold-adapted human populations. The final evidence of the Antarctic civilization appeared in ice core layers that dated to the last decades before permanent glaciation began. These layers contained atmospheric traces that suggested industrial activity continuing even as climate conditions deteriorated, evidence that technological civilizations had persisted until the very end, perhaps attempting last-minute solutions to the approaching catastrophe. Chemical signatures in the ice suggested frantic attempts at large-scale climate modification. Atmospheric traces of unusual compounds indicated possible attempts to alter atmospheric chemistry or create artificial heating through industrial processes. Some researchers interpreted these signatures as evidence that Antarctic civilizations had understood the cosmic nature of the threat they faced and had attempted technological solutions to prevent or reverse climate change. The ice core data also revealed evidence of what appeared to be controlled demolition or systematic destruction of surface structures during the final years before glaciation became complete. Rather than allowing their cities and technological installations to be gradually buried by accumulating ice, Antarctic civilizations might have deliberately dismantled or destroyed surface evidence of their existence. This systematic destruction could have served multiple purposes. It might have been an attempt to deny technological resources to potential enemies, a way of preserving advanced knowledge by moving it to protected underground locations, or even a deliberate effort to conceal evidence of their civilization from future discovery by less advanced societies. The pattern of deliberate destruction was consistent with evidence found at the archaeological sites, where surface structures showed signs of systematic dismantling rather than gradual decay. Valuable materials had been removed, technological devices had been relocated or destroyed, and architectural elements had been carefully preserved in protected locations. But the most haunting evidence of the Antarctic civilization's final days came from what appeared to be message systems designed to survive the approaching glaciation. Carved symbols and geometric patterns found at various sites showed characteristics that suggested they were intended as communications to future discoverers, warnings, historical records, or technical information that could be useful to later civilizations that might uncover the buried remains. These message systems showed remarkable foresight and long-term thinking. The Antarctic civilizations had recognized that their surface world was doomed, but had taken measures to ensure that their knowledge and achievements might survive to benefit future generations. The messages were encoded in durable materials and placed in locations where they were most likely to be preserved through millions of years of glaciation. Dr. William Broad, a science writer who had investigated claims of ancient message systems, found parallels between the Antarctic symbols and warning systems that modern civilizations were designing for nuclear waste repositories. Both represented attempts to communicate across vast time periods with unknown future civilizations that might discover dangerous or valuable materials left by their predecessors. The comparison raised troubling questions about what the Antarctic civilizations might have been trying to warn future generations about. If their message systems were analogous to nuclear waste warnings, they might indicate that hazardous materials or technologies were buried along with the civilization itself. The melting of Antarctic ice sheets due to modern climate change might be exposing not just archaeological treasures, but dangerous artifacts that could pose risks to contemporary civilization. Some researchers speculated that the Antarctic civilizations might have possessed energy technologies or industrial capabilities that had contributed to their own destruction. Perhaps their attempts to prevent climate catastrophe through technological intervention had backfired, creating environmental disasters that accelerated their civilization's collapse. The possibility that advanced prehistoric technologies might have contributed to global climate catastrophe resonated with contemporary concerns about anthropogenic climate change. If sophisticated ancient civilizations had triggered environmental disasters through technological overreach, their fate might serve as a warning about the risks facing modern industrial civilization. But the Antarctic climate catastrophe also demonstrated the vulnerability of even advanced civilizations to external threats beyond their control. The cosmic impacts that had triggered Antarctica's glaciation represented the kind of existential risk that could destroy any civilization regardless of its technological capabilities. The preservation of Antarctic civilization beneath the ice might be humanity's only record of how advanced societies had attempted to survive planetary-scale disasters. The study of Antarctica's climate catastrophe was revealing that Earth's climate system was far more unstable than previously recognized. The rapid transitions between temperate and glacial conditions suggested that climate tipping points could be crossed with little warning, triggering irreversible changes that could bury entire civilizations beneath advancing ice sheets. Modern climate change was beginning to reverse the processes that had created Antarctica's frozen preserve of prehistoric civilization. As ice sheets melted and retreated, they were exposing evidence that had been protected for millions of years but might not survive exposure to contemporary environmental conditions. The race was beginning to understand Antarctica's buried civilization before climate change destroyed the very ice that had preserved it. The irony was profound. The same climate instability that had buried the Antarctic civilization was now threatening to destroy the evidence of its existence. Modern civilization's attempts to understand its prehistoric predecessors were racing against the clock of contemporary climate change, which might erase the last traces of humanity's most advanced ancient achievements. The lessons of Antarctica's climate catastrophe extended beyond academic interest to urgent practical concerns about contemporary civilization's vulnerability to rapid climate change. If advanced prehistoric societies could be buried beneath miles of ice within decades, what did that suggest about modern civilization's ability to survive similar climate transitions? The answer might be buried beneath the melting ice of Antarctica, waiting to be discovered before it disappeared forever into the warming waters of a changing world. The ice is melting. For the first time in 34 million years, Antarctica's massive ice sheets are retreating at an accelerating pace, exposing bedrock that has not seen sunlight since long before the emergence of human civilization. What is being revealed in those newly accessible regions challenges everything we thought we knew about our species' place in planetary history, and what we might discover in the coming decades could fundamentally reshape human understanding of our origins, capabilities, and destiny. The Larsen C ice shelf collapsed into the Southern Ocean in 2017, an event so massive that it could be seen from space. The iceberg that carved away was larger than the state of Delaware, and its departure exposed areas of seafloor and coastal terrain that had been hidden for millennia. Within months, satellite imagery revealed geometric patterns and artificial-looking structures in the newly exposed regions, features that seemed inconsistent with natural geological processes. Dr. Eric Rignot, a glaciologist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, had been monitoring Antarctic ice loss for decades, but the accelerating pace of change was exceeding even the most pessimistic climate models. His radar measurements showed that ice sheets were losing mass at a rate that would expose vast areas of previously hidden terrain within decades rather than centuries. The implications were staggering. If advanced prehistoric civilizations had indeed existed in Antarctica, their preserved remains were about to be exposed to surface conditions for the first time since their burial. The same climate change that threatened modern coastal cities with rising sea levels was simultaneously creating unprecedented opportunities for archaeological discovery in Earth's most remote continent. But the window of opportunity might be brief. The exposed archaeological sites would be vulnerable to erosion, weathering, and contamination that could destroy evidence that had survived in pristine condition for millions of years. The organic materials, technological artifacts, and architectural structures that had been preserved in Antarctica's natural deep freeze might degrade rapidly once exposed to fluctuating temperatures, moisture, and biological activity. Research teams were already racing to document and investigate newly exposed regions before irreplaceable evidence was lost. The logistical challenges were enormous. Antarctica's remote location, extreme weather conditions, and international treaty restrictions made rapid archaeological investigation extraordinarily difficult. Most of the newly exposed areas were accessible only by helicopter or specialized snow vehicles, and research seasons were limited to the few months of austral summer when conditions allowed safe operations. Yet what they were discovering was worth every effort and expense. The newly exposed regions contained not just isolated artifacts or structures, but evidence of extensive prehistoric occupation that suggested Antarctica had once supported substantial populations with sophisticated technological capabilities. The scale of the archaeological remains implied that Antarctica's hidden civilization had been far larger and more advanced than even the most optimistic researchers had speculated. Ground-penetrating radar surveys of newly ice-free areas were revealing interconnected networks of underground structures that extended for hundreds of miles beneath the continent's surface. These subterranean complexes appeared to have been designed as refuge systems, sophisticated underground cities that might have allowed Antarctic civilizations to survive the onset of glaciation for extended periods. The engineering required to construct such massive underground installations would have exceeded the capabilities of any known historical civilization. The tunnel systems showed evidence of precise excavation techniques, sophisticated ventilation systems, and architectural features that suggested long-term habitation by substantial populations. Some chambers were large enough to house thousands of people and appeared to have contained agricultural facilities that could have provided food security during extended periods of surface uninhabitability. But perhaps the most remarkable discovery was evidence that some of these underground complexes might still be accessible and potentially functional. Thermal imaging surveys detected heat signatures from deep underground sources that seemed inconsistent with natural geothermal activity. The heat patterns suggested artificial energy generation systems that might have continued operating for millions of years after their creators vanished from the surface. The possibility that functional Antarctic technology might still exist in operational condition raised extraordinary questions about the durability and sophistication of prehistoric engineering. If Antarctic civilizations had developed energy systems capable of operating autonomously for geological time periods, their technological achievements might have far exceeded anything in the modern world. Some researchers speculated that the underground energy systems might be maintaining environmental conditions suitable for preserving not just artifacts, but potentially living biological systems. If Antarctic civilizations had developed advanced life support technologies, portions of their populations might have survived in underground refuge systems throughout the millions of years of surface glaciation. The concept of surviving Antarctic populations seemed fantastical, but extremophile research had revealed that complex life forms could survive in dormant states for extraordinary time periods under the right conditions. Antarctic ice cores contained viable bacteria that had remained frozen for millions of years, demonstrating that biological preservation was possible across geological timescales. If human populations had indeed survived in Antarctic underground refuges, they would represent the oldest continuous human civilization on Earth, a society that had maintained technological capabilities and cultural continuity across millions of years, while the surface world underwent repeated cycles of glaciation and climate change. The implications for modern civilization were profound. The surviving Antarctic populations might possess technological knowledge and environmental adaptation techniques that could be crucial for humanity's survival in an era of accelerating climate change. Their experience with managing technological civilization during periods of extreme climate instability might provide insights that could prevent contemporary civilization from suffering a similar fate. But first contact with such populations, if they existed, would raise unprecedented ethical and political challenges. Who would have authority to negotiate with representatives of humanity's oldest civilization? How would territorial claims and resource rights be resolved? What would be the implications for global political systems if advanced prehistoric civilizations proved to still exist? The Antarctic Treaty System had been designed to manage scientific research and territorial claims on an uninhabited continent. The discovery of surviving indigenous populations would fundamentally challenge the treaty's basic assumptions and potentially trigger international disputes over sovereignty, resource access, and contact protocols. Some governments appeared to be preparing for such possibilities. Military activities in Antarctica had increased significantly in recent years, with several nations establishing expanded research facilities and transportation infrastructure that seemed to exceed purely scientific requirements. The official justifications involved climate research and environmental monitoring, but the scale and nature of some installations suggested preparation for scenarios involving significant archaeological discoveries or contact with unknown populations. Declassified documents revealed that government agencies had been aware of Antarctic anomalies for decades and had developed contingency plans for managing discoveries that might challenge conventional historical narratives. The plans included protocols for information control, international coordination, and public disclosure that would minimize social and political disruption from revolutionary archaeological findings. But controlling information about Antarctic discoveries was becoming increasingly difficult as commercial satellite imagery and civilian research capabilities democratized access to polar monitoring data. Independent researchers were identifying and documenting Antarctic anomalies at an accelerating rate, making it impossible for official agencies to maintain comprehensive secrecy about unusual discoveries. The internet had created global networks of civilian researchers who shared satellite imagery, coordinated analysis efforts, and published findings without government oversight or control. These distributed investigation networks were discovering and documenting evidence of Antarctic anomalies faster than official research programs could investigate or suppress them. Linda Moulton, Howe's investigation of Antarctic anomalies had evolved into a crowdsourced research effort involving hundreds of volunteers who analysed satellite imagery, compiled historical documents, and interviewed witnesses with Antarctic experience. Their findings suggested that extensive artificial structures existed throughout Antarctica, far beyond what any single official research program had acknowledged. The crowdsourced research was revealing that Antarctic anomalies were not isolated discoveries, but part of a continent-wide archaeological complex that implied prehistoric occupation on a scale that challenged fundamental assumptions about ancient human capabilities. The evidence suggested that Antarctica had not just harboured small outposts or settlements, but had been home to a sophisticated technological civilization that had modified the entire continent's infrastructure. Underground tunnel networks appeared to connect archaeological sites across thousands of miles, creating transportation and communication systems that spanned the entire continent. Surface structures showed evidence of coordinated planning and resource management that implied central governmental or organizational systems capable of managing continental-scale projects. The scope of Antarctic archaeological remains suggested that prehistoric civilizations had achieved not just technological sophistication, but organizational capabilities that exceeded those of most modern nations. The engineering projects implied by the underground infrastructure would have required coordination between millions of people across time periods spanning thousands of years. Such organisational achievements raised questions about the social and political structures that had governed Antarctic civilizations. How had they maintained stability and coordination across such vast scales of space and time? What governmental systems had enabled them to undertake projects that spanned multiple generations? What had motivated populations to commit resources to infrastructure projects whose benefits might not be realised for centuries? The answers might be preserved in the symbolic and artistic systems that researchers were discovering at Antarctic archaeological sites. Carved messages, architectural decorations, and technological artefacts showed evidence of sophisticated information storage and transmission systems that might preserve records of Antarctic social and political organisation. Dr. Maria Gimbutas, an archaeologist who had studied symbolic systems in prehistoric European cultures before her death in 1994, had developed analytical frameworks that might be applicable to interpreting Antarctic symbolic systems. Her work suggested that complex societies could encode sophisticated information in artistic and religious symbols that preserved cultural knowledge across extended time periods. The Antarctic symbolic systems showed characteristics that suggested they had been designed specifically for long-term information preservation. The symbols were carved in durable materials, placed in protected locations, and arranged in patterns that seemed designed to be comprehensible to future discoverers who might not share the original creator's cultural background. Some symbols appeared to be mathematical or scientific notations that could communicate universal concepts across cultural boundaries. Others seemed to represent historical records, technical specifications, or philosophical concepts that the Antarctic civilizations had considered important enough to preserve for posterity. The most intriguing symbols were those that seemed to predict or prepare for future climate changes. Some Antarctic message systems appeared to include information about climate cycles, astronomical phenomena, and geological processes that could be useful for future civilizations facing similar environmental challenges. These predictive elements suggested that Antarctic civilizations had understood that their surface world was temporary and had deliberately designed their message systems to benefit future societies that might face comparable threats. The symbols might contain crucial information about climate adaptation, technological development, or survival strategies that could be applicable to contemporary challenges. But accessing and interpreting this information required archaeological investigation on a scale that exceeded current research capabilities. The Antarctic archaeological complex appeared to be larger and more complex than all other known archaeological sites combined, requiring international cooperation and resource commitments that had never been achieved for purely scientific purposes. The urgency was increasing as climate change accelerated the exposure of Antarctic archaeological sites. Each year brought new discoveries as retreating ice revealed previously hidden structures, but the same climate change that enabled discovery was also threatening to destroy evidence that had survived for millions of years. The melting ice was creating unstable conditions that could damage or destroy archaeological sites through erosion, flooding, or structural collapse. Temperature fluctuations were causing freeze-thaw cycles that could fragment stone structures and degrade organic materials. Increased biological activity in warming regions was introducing decomposition processes that could break down preserved artifacts. The race to understand Antarctica's hidden civilization was becoming a race against time itself. Climate change was simultaneously creating the greatest archaeological opportunity in human history and threatening to destroy it before its full significance could be understood. The sleeping giant beneath Antarctica's ice was beginning to stir. As the frozen continent awakened from its millions-year slumber, it was revealing secrets that could transform human understanding of our species' capabilities, origins, and potential. But whether these secrets would be preserved for future generations or lost forever to the warming world depended on decisions being made today about research priorities, international cooperation, and our commitment to understanding the deepest mysteries of human history. Perhaps Antarctica isn't humanity's final frontier, but our forgotten beginning, and what lies sleeping beneath the ice is about to wake up and remind us of who we might have been and who we still might become.